The first thing my brother said to me when finishing watching this movie was, "That was dark." And that was the most spoiler-free review I will give in this film from this point on, because it's accurate. Granted, I haven't been a fan of Marvel in years, but this film took Marvel characters to an all-new dark places we had never seen before, at least that I'm currently aware of. We never saw the Avengers actively deal with suicidal ideation and inner darkness some of us face, and some of us more than others will face in their lifetime. If you couldn't tell by now, I'm in the camp of the people who have dealt with these emotions, ideations, and or issues, if you will, more often than I would like to admit. So from the very opening of this film, I looked to my brother and I said, this movie is going to hit me hard. And it did. It shocks me to say this, but at points, this film made me feel choked up for these characters, and I felt they really resonated with me. Granted, that may be biased since I already enjoyed most of them from previous films, and or this was an introduction to some of them for me, and I had nothing to go off of other than this movie. Another important element was the comedy. Marvel comedy is not often one that I find myself connecting with or enjoying, but I thoroughly enjoyed the gags in this film, and for once they didn't really pull punches in the jokes. They were dark, at least for Marvel standards, and as someone who uses comedy to cope with, it's nice to see it actively being used in films, which usually are comedically bankrupt and driven solely by cool action sequences than actual storytelling and characters. This film had something to say, something to critique even about the system and what it does to the mentally unwell people such as myself and presumably many others who watch this film. It was nice to watch a Marvel movie with a point for once. So let's discuss Thunderbolts and what it's trying to say. Warning, spoilers ahead. Earlier this year to the end of last year, I went through a darkness I haven't felt in a long time. I felt empty, and frankly, I had no interest in being alive anymore. The darkness got me. Not occasionally, not some days of the week, but every day for months on end. Thunderbolts takes this idea of darkness and mental illness and implements it into all of the characters involved in this film. Our main cast of group of rejects and miscreants that play in the shadows, all assassin type characters, and all characters that have spent most of their lives in the shadows to some extent. Whether that be being trained as an assassin from practically birth, to being a child who grew up in a lab, to a man who lost his family due to his trauma, to a man from the day that he was born was seen as a waste and a problem. All the characters have their own personal issues, and I'll get to the ones we see the least out of the way before getting into the bigger discussions around darkness. Ava Starr, better known as a Ghost, is a character we get limited time with, and is mostly a face value damaged, as she spends almost all of her screen time talking about how traumatic her childhood was. It makes her character feel rather flat compared to the others, and she is probably one of the flatter parts of the movie, as we got the point the first time she mentions it, but she was more of a comedic side character with the more clever one-liners than most characters. It made me rather disappointed by the end of the movie when we got very little from her and her backstory, as her movie is not one that many, including myself, plan on rewatching, and it would have been nice to be reintroduced to her character, especially in a movie based on overcoming one's own trauma. It would have been very satisfying to see and get a look into her backstory and that darker trauma that so much defines her throughout this movie. U.S. Agent was a character that I was introduced to in this film, and as someone who knew very little about this character, / didn't even know this character at all, I didn't care about him at all in this film, but he still did a good job at making me sympathetic towards him. He differs from the rest of the cast in trauma, most of his being focused on his mistakes as an adult instead of what happened to him as a child. It puts some merit in his more boisterous and prideful personality, as a cover for the very insecure man that he really is. A man who knows he did wrong by his loved ones, and a man who would do anything to get them back and say, "I'm sorry." Red Guardian isn't really given much trauma related to the storyline, but he is still have his very own of what it means to overcome his own self-worth issues. He takes a major role in Yelena finding herself as she becomes more lost in the void I will discuss after, and him helping her pull herself out of that void. He wasn't a good father, but if she can give him the chance, he'll try again and he will do better this time around, and I believe him. Finally, there's Bucky, who although gets limited screen time, you still get a lot from him. Granted, Bucky has been given many chances in the MCU to have his moment of trauma and overcoming struggles, so it wasn't necessary to give him anything in this film. So instead of him getting his own set of problems to overcome, he ends up serving as more of a mentor figure for all of these people who he understands more than anyone. No one can understand a group of brainwashed assassins and mercenaries better than the Winter Soldier. So knowing that history gives Bucky weight to his words when he gives him a speech about how it's never too late to redeem yourself no matter what you've done. Empty was how I would describe myself during that time I mentioned earlier in the video. At my lowest, every day I woke up and felt empty. Like there was nothing inside of me. I was a shell. There was no rhyme or reason to keep moving, but keep moving was all that I could do at the time, and therefore I did. There were nights and days where all there was emptiness. Days that lasted so long, and restless nights filled with panic and anxiety. There was a void where a person was supposed to be, and I didn't know why that was. Yelena is a great representation of not only the grief, but the isolation that comes with depression. She's the movie's main character for all intents and purposes, and the way they handle her character is great. She starts in the beginning lost in herself and her work. Her whole monologue is dedicated to how the loss of her sister has deeply affected her, not just in grief, but in life. Losing her sister made her realize there was no reason for all of it, and there never really was. She replays moments in her life she regrets over and over again, and she continues to nitpick them with the goal to prove herself right. None of it is worth it, especially not her own self. She has moments with characters that are played off as comedy, but we know she's telling the truth. We see that when she says none of it is worth it all, and it all amounts to nothing. It's how she feels. It's how she felt. It's how I felt. It's how I can feel. Yelena wants more of herself, but can't see a world where she gets more, where she deserves more. She believes she is where she belongs. She is getting what she deserves. Yelena is the movie's way to put the viewer into the brain of someone who is mentally ill. We know none of how she acts is her fault. She was wrong from the day she was born, yet she still blames herself. We know the blame and shame she carries is not fair nor realistic, but it's exactly what happens. Yelena stands in for what it means to be more indifferent in a world that can only handle what is deemed as acceptable. To be mentally ill is to not fit a mold, and it's no one's fault but your own for being born. It's that sin that we all bear, the sin of being given life in this world, and Yelena's story directly deals with it. But Yelena isn't dedicated to how being born was a mistake. Rather, Yelena spends the film learning how to change that narrative. She may have not had a family that she dreamed of having, but she did have one. She has a sister who she loved and loves her, and she wants to push forward. She gains friends in this movie who will assist her in saving lives. She's a part of a group of people who have all been told by the world that they have no right to live, and yet there they are, the ones who defeat the bad guy. Not defeat, but rather show the bad guy we aren't alone. That void may never go away. My worst fear is that I will wake up and that void will happen all over again, and I wake up every day hoping it hasn't come back. But the people around us make that void less overcoming, less controlling, less powerful. It may never go away, but there is hoping it will never win either. I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder this year. It was an interesting set of emotions that came with the diagnosis. One part was happy to finally have that missing puzzle piece as to why I never was able to figure out myself. The other was not excited for the steps moving forward to better myself and my life. Then there was that part of me who begged for there to be more. The part of me who begged for there to be a reason to be more messed up and to have an excuse for why I am the way that I am, because that wasn't enough. I told my brother after watching this movie that Bob was a character written to be bipolar. I believe that in full, and that his character is handled so reminiscent of my own personal experience in life from having bipolar disorder. From the highs of your life making you feel unstoppable, to the substance abuse to cope with your own inadequacy, to the constant feeling of no matter what you do, you're never good enough. Bob's life has been that of failure all along the way. He failed to protect his mom, he failed to get clean, he failed to keep those around him safe, and he failed to even control himself in the end. I don't think I have a single thing in my life that I have an ounce of pride towards. Nothing I have done or completed that I feel success in. I don't know if that's a part of being bipolar, but I know it's something that me and Bob have in common. Something else we have in common is the need of those around us. See, this movie ends with this big bad guy not getting defeated in some action-packed endgame grandiosa fight, but instead by a man beating himself over and over and over again, giving in to all the darkness within him until people around him embrace him, until he is shown that those around him care, and that maybe, just maybe, he has had good impact on someone or something in life. I lied. I do have pride in something in my life, my personal relationships. I work hard to maintain a healthy connection with those I care about, to push back on my negative instincts and urges, and to stay a good friend and family member to those around me and to all of my loved ones. Bob learns that feeling by the end of this film. Bob learns how much better it is to be surrounded by people who care. Bob may seem conflicted and like he makes no sense when he goes from egotistical to insecure, but as someone who has been like that my whole life, Bob made perfect sense to me. This movie does a lot of different things from most Marvel movies. It's not as action focused. There is no endgame battle, and all the characters are almost powerless. Instead, this movie looks past the superhero personas we're so used to and looks underneath to the characters that are there. It questions the treatment of those with mental illness and why we would isolate those who are already so isolated. It goes darker than most Marvel movies, even playing with the idea of suicidal ideation, and ends the story by winning the battle with the power of friendship. But most important thing this movie does is inform the viewer it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, that void you feel, that emptiness within you, it does not define you. You define you. You are not alone, so reach out and someone will grab on. The void may never go away, but it can be smaller if you try. This is the first Marvel movie I have actually enjoyed in genuine years. It was good. It was dark. And on my way out, I heard a pair of usual Marvel fans say it really wasn't good, and it was a film that they would never rewatch again. I think to many, this movie will go down as a cheap friendship wins above all else film. But I would dare you to reconsider, as this film that finally says something I thought Marvel forgot to do. Say something and speak on something. And I really enjoy that. I've been Enigma, and goodbye.